Hey folks, very good evening and thank you for joining in. And could you just confirm in the chat window if I'm visible and audible clearly? We'll get started in just a few minutes. I think all of us are a little early today, but anyway, we'll start at 2 minutes past 7. Cool. Let me keep everything ready. Hey, good evening folks. Thank you for joining in. So let's wait for a while for everyone else to join in. In the meantime, if there are any questions, feel free to ask me. I'll take, let's say 6-7 minutes and answer as many questions as I can. And we'll start the live session at 7:02 or 7:03. Cool. Hey, good evening, folks. Good evening. Krishna, I'll come to that. I'll answer that. I think on the website, on the same website where you've written the exam. Anyway, I've made a note of it. By tomorrow, end of day, we should be launching the results for it. We are just collating everything, double checking all of it very thoroughly. So most likely we'll do it by tomorrow, end of day. We'll also send out an email and things like that. We will also update everything on the same page where you took the examination with all the details. Anyway, I'll mention this a little later. So Gautam, it's a good question you have. In theory of computation, for closure properties, again, proving all these closure properties of various languages is slightly tricky. I mean, it's not impossible. You can prove them. Like for some languages, I know the proof in my head because it's commonsensical or it's easy to arrive at. But for some languages and for some properties, it's not that easy. So I think in our course videos, we explain a mnemonic or a memory trick, if I'm not wrong. So we tell you how to remember these closure properties very easily and reproduce that big table that we have, like various properties for various languages. That's a memory trick that I often use. If I were preparing for GATE this year, I would surely remember that. Again, for the GATE examination, since you don't have time to prove all of them in the real examination, it's better to just use that mnemonic as a shortcut. That's what we would recommend our students. Again, if you know the proofs, nothing beats that. But again, knowing all the proofs and being rigorous with them, thinking of the proofs in the examination hall also takes time. We don't want to waste time there. So Akash, you don't have to worry about the scholarship test because it's all relative, right? So it doesn't matter if it was slightly tricky for you, it would have been tricky for others also, right? So it's uniform. So there is no problem if you felt little tricky or maybe some questions little lengthy. So don't worry about it. So Bhargav, we will post the solutions for the scholarship test. Any follow-ups or any concerns or any mistakes that you see in our solutions, just email us, right? I think doing the videos for that will take some time because there are like 45 questions. So I think we have provided text answers. In case you didn't get them, just shoot an email. In case there are any errors in our solutions, we will correct them accordingly or delete that question or award marks to everyone and things like that. Cool. Very good. So Madhavam says, I've done silly mistakes in the scholarship test. That's all okay, guys. Like, I mean, to be honest with you, the scholarship test's purpose is to basically provide the course to those deserving candidates. Again, some of you have done silly mistakes also, could be toppers, right? So don't worry about it. A lot of students like you would have done silly mistakes. Doing silly mistakes now is better than doing silly mistakes in the final GATE exam because you don't have the GATE exam till one more year. So Ayush says, I scored very low in the scholarship test. Please give me some ways to improve. Again, Ayush, I think I've mentioned this on almost every live session. There is also a dedicated video on our YouTube channel on how to prepare for GATE CS 2022, where we in detail tell you how to improve your problem solving skills, right? I think that video is called How to Improve Problem Solving Skills for GATE. Please watch that. That teaches you various tricks that we've seen work not just for us, but for hundreds of our students, right, last year, who have gotten actually good ranks in the top 300, top 500 ranks. So these are well-known techniques that we have learned. Some of them we have learned from our own students. Some of them we have used in our own learning. So just check that video. There is a dedicated video on how to improve problem solving skills that will immensely help you. Aditya, you're right. MSQs are trickier to score. I think the reason GATE introduced MSQs from last year is because they want to make the question paper trickier as compared to the previous years. And we see that actually. If you see the GATE question paper, both the two sets last year, they are considered trickier than the previous years. And the purpose of MSQs in all competitive exams where there are MSQs, they tend to be trickier. They're not hard. Remember, there is a difference between hard and tricky. Because there are 4 options, you can't do elimination like strategies. Okay, so that's the problem there. Cool, it's 7:01. Some of you are asking about the results of the scholarship test. I have a note about it specifically. So let me just go to my screen. Okay, can you just confirm if my screen is visible clearly, just to make sure that there are no glitches in the screen share? Can you please confirm that? Is my screen clearly visible? Okay, cool. So here is what many of you have been asking. That's why I made a note of it so that I don't miss it. The scholarship exam results most likely will be announced tomorrow by end of day. We will try and announce it. When I say end of day, it could be late night also. We're just collating everything, double checking, triple checking, running all of our anomaly detection models and things like that. This was a scholarship test for the GATE, which we had, I think, the previous Sunday, right? So thankfully it went very well, no glitches whatsoever. And I'm very happy that many of you took the test. The results will be published by tomorrow end of day. And as soon as they're published, you can see them on the page where you have taken the examination itself. Okay, so that you know if you're there in the top or not. Is my voice low? Some of you are saying my voice is low. Let me just check. Just give me a second. My voice is okay, right? Is there a problem? Is there a problem with my voice? Is there any problem with my voice, folks? Can you please let me know? It's fine. Okay, cool. So I'll take that it's fine. Okay, everything is fine. Okay. Probably somebody had a microphone, somebody had a speaker issue on their phone. Okay, cool. So again, we'll announce all the stats, all the data tomorrow itself. I don't want to comment about how many marks you should get right now because that's not fair. We'll publish all the results tomorrow. Anyway, you can most likely by tomorrow night. That's why I wrote end of day very clearly here. Cool. So somebody is asking about test series. So let me just tell you that we are just almost finished doing most of the work for test series. We were waiting for finishing the scholarship test because most students will be occupied with it. We will announce this in a day or two, right? It's more or less ready. We're just doing final edits to the web page. Okay, cool. So just a couple of days. Maybe, if possible, we'll do it tomorrow or else worst case day after. And if possible, even earlier. Okay, so with that, I'll take the general questions again at the end of the discussion. So somebody is asking, is some percentage of marks good in the scholarship test? Again, remember that if you're getting about 40% plus in the scholarship test, you may not be a topper, right? You may not be in the top 200, but you're doing good, right? Because the questions have been given slightly tricky and things like that. Of course, the syllabus is limited and hence there are a few tricky questions. So just like our practice tests in the course, if you're scoring 40 plus marks, you're on a good track record. Keep improving, keep going towards the 65-70% mark in the next 7-8 months that you have before the examination. And then if you cross the 70% mark in the actual GATE exam, you're in a very good position, right? So that's what you should aspire for. So if you're getting more than 40, you're on the right track. If you're getting less than 40, you have to introspect and think very thoroughly and put in more effort to improve. So we have seen people last year who got significantly less marks in scholarship tests and practice tests, but they've put in good amount of effort to go into the 65-70 range and got it in the top 300 ranks. Okay, so that's very possible. I'm not saying it's not possible, just wanted to give you some context there. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get started with the questions. I'll answer your general questions again at the end as usual. So here is a question. Please read the question carefully and tackle it. Again, let's focus on solving the questions now. The rankers list will be published by tomorrow end of day. That's what I mentioned a while ago. And let's solve the questions now. I'll come back to your questions again, general questions at the end. Those of you who are asking about the scholarship test result, please go back a little in the video. You'll see that being clearly explained by me. Again, I'm just writing some good points that somebody's asked about this specific question. I will answer that. It's a very nice question that somebody asked actually. Okay, I think most of you said that B is the answer, but actually B is not the answer. The answer is C. You can execute it in GCC or any major compiler of C. The answer is actually C and not B. Now, before I go and explain why it is C, let me just answer a very important question. File handling is part of the C syllabus. Unfortunately, there are no questions asked. If you see previous year questions, you don't find many questions in the last 5-6 years, if I'm not wrong. Okay, we don't know why, but we still cover it in our course, and we think there might be a surprise this year. It's better to be prepared for surprises and cover this topic thoroughly because it's clearly there in the syllabus. Okay, so in previous year questions, if you see last 4-5 years, you'll not find them, unfortunately, which is unfortunate. Probably one reason could be because the way files are handled could be slightly operating system dependent, and Gate, when they're creating the examination, they want to be double careful not to have any results which are system dependent. Probably that could be a reason. I'm not sure about it. But we don't see many questions in this, but it's there in the syllabus. That's why we added a question here. Now in this question is slightly tricky. This question is not an easy question. Most people will think that the answer is B, which it is not. That is because of a very nice loophole in the implementation of fgets. Okay, so this program is simple actually. What are you doing? You're just creating a file pointer. You're checking if the file pointer is null or not. It's not null because the file exists. Then what are you doing? You're trying to get the first 10. So the way most of us will read this is you're trying to copy the first 10 characters into this into this string, right? That's what most of us will think. And this is the file pointer, and then basically puts it into standard IO. But the problem here is the way fgets is defined is not that. Fgets has a very tricky definition. Again, fgets and fputs are actually used a lot, just like fprintf and fscanf. But fgets has a very tricky implementation. I just wanted to bring that to your notice. Okay, that's why this question was created. If you see fgets documentation, again, at least for the most widely used functions like fprintf, fscanf, fgets, fputs, you should know how these functions operate. Because you could get a question this year and you don't want to be caught by a surprise, because this is an actually easy question. So fgets basically char star fgets, char star str, int num, file stream, right? These are the three inputs. Everything is all right. Now if you see, it reads character from the stream and stores the C string into str until num-1 characters, not num characters. That's how fgets is actually implemented in C. It's also there in C++, by the way. Okay, so in C++, you basically, it's not in Gate syllabus, but you basically import C stdio, right? So now you might say, hey, why is it implemented like that? That's a good question to ask. Okay, so again, All that I'm telling you is please know the function definition and what each of these parameters do for these 4-5 functions about file handling. If you know this, you're cool, because you might get a question and you don't want to be caught napping in the examination or caught lost in the examination. So the way fgets works is, it reads, now you might say there are 10, the number here is 10, but as we saw in the actual official reference of C, it actually reads only 9 characters. And the reasoning behind it is as follows. Again, so if you take the 9 characters, where is our file? Our file is this, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now the reason it reads only 9, okay, to the best of my knowledge, again, I've not read why people defined fgets as this, but the reason, one justification that we could think of is that it reads the 9 characters because finally it is trying to create a string of length 10. When you're trying to create a string of length 10, the last one you have to have the null character, right? So that's why only 9 characters are copied from the file, and the last one is \0, because it could so happen that my string itself could be my character array, which is str, could just have a capacity of 10, right? So we believe, again, we have not seen the actual C's internal implementation of it, but most likely the reason this is defined like this in C programming for a very long time, where this number -1 characters are copied, is most likely, it's a reasonable guesstimate that we are making, is most likely because \0 has to be added at the end of every string. So the answer to this is C, because it only copies 9 characters. Now some of you might say, hey, should I remember all these functions? There are only 4-5 major functions like fprintf, fscanf, fgets, fputs, fclose, right? So there are these 5-6 functions. If you know them, if you know how the functions themselves work, I think you're cool. Sometimes in the gate examination, if a slightly not popular or not widely used function is given, they could give us a whole function reference like this. They could take an official function reference like this and copy paste the whole thing. They could do that. Okay, till now we have not seen many questions, but we are trying to cover a question from files just for completeness sake. Okay, so cool. Okay, let's go to the second question now. Okay, this is an interesting one. Some of you have questions about the scholarship exam. I'll answer them at the end of the session. I've already answered this question at the very beginning, so you can always go back in this video because it's a live stream and see that answer. Okay. Let's please focus on answering the questions here. I think that is important. That's why you're here. That's why at least I am here. I'll answer your questions at the end. It's blurred. Can you just increase? Again, I can't increase the size of this because then it won't fit in one page, unfortunately. Let me see it on my phone. Just give me a second. On my phone, I'm able to see this clearly, and I'm streaming at 480p. So I'm able to see this on my phone fairly clearly. Just make sure that you're streaming at some 480 or so. Guys, please, let's not discuss about the scholarship test now because we have questions that we have to solve. I promise you, I'll answer your questions about scholarship test at the end. I've already spent 10 minutes at the beginning, or at least a few minutes answering the most popular question, when is the results coming out, okay? So please solve this. That's what is important now. And if you're not interested in solving, you might as well leave. I mean, there's no point, right? Let's solve the questions, come on. This is a very typical GATE question about dynamic scoping. Very typical of GATE. I enjoyed solving this question, so think about it. Oh, the answers are all around the place. Maybe I made a mistake. I'll cross check anyway. We'll solve it together. I think people are saying A, C, D. Are there any B's in the solution? I didn't see any B's. I think A, C, D is what everybody is saying. Again, this is a slightly tricky question. I'm telling you well in advance. You have to be careful, avoid silly mistakes here. So let me write it down just to drive the point that this is a tricky question. This is like a typical 2-mark question in GATE. Of course, with negative marking because this is an MCQ. Okay, let me see the answers. Again, some of you have done it incorrectly. Just correct your answers if you can. Again, we can't execute it because C has static scoping. The only language that, anyway, I'll come to that. Okay, let's solve it together. Maybe I made a mistake, I don't know, but let's solve it together. Okay. So, so where are we? First, we are running the main function. That's where everything starts, right? So we are running the main function. The main function now calls the run function, right? So what's happening in the run function? The main function calls the run function. Here there is a variable called n that is declared, right? And n equals to 4 now. Now it's calling this function called printed, right? So this is calling printed, okay? It's calling printed with a value of 7. Now again, whenever you have dynamic scoping, what does dynamic scoping basically mean? It means you always use the function call or the function call stack and you go to the most recent environment for the scope of any variable. Okay, this is again the only language that I've ever used which has dynamic scoping is Perl, because Perl lets you have both dynamic scoping and static scoping. You can choose whatever you want, and that's the most confusing thing in Perl. Like I really hated reading code which had dynamic scoping. Most people avoid it actually. Anyway, so you have printed 7. So what happens here? Printed 7. So this calls the printed function. Where is the printed function? Is here, right? So x is 7. Now here, what is it saying? It's trying to say print x plus. Okay, so what is happening? X is 7. 7 plus n. Now there is no local variable n here. Okay, so what does it do? It goes to the previous function that called it. So it goes back. So what happens here is if you think about the call stack, right? Again, that's a concept that we cover in data structures after we cover what is a stack, right? But logically speaking, once you have this, it always goes and looks back here. So here you have n equals to 4, right? So this n will be equals to 4. So 7 plus 4, this will be equal to 11. So we print 11. So the first output here is 11. Let's write it down. Okay, so 11. Next, what happens after we call printed? So this printed is executed. Now what happens? You come back here. Okay, so this printed is executed, you come back here. Okay, let me write it this way. This printed is executed. Now we are in the run function. In the run function, n becomes 5. It's better to write a linear thing like this. That's better. Or else let's just erase this, right? I can erase this here instead of, because I have the possibility to erase it, right? So, okay, so this function is done. So now my n becomes 5. Now let's see what's happening here. It is calling the increment function. So let me go into the increment function. Okay, increment function has no variables that it's taking. So I go into the increment function. In the increment function, it says n equals to n plus 2. So which n is it going to use here? Look at this. It says n equals to n plus 2. So the n that it's going to use, it again goes back and keeps looking where is n. So n is already here, right? So it will modify that variable. So n equals to 5 here, right? And which n does this mean? This means the n that is there, because there is no local variable here. There is no variable defined in this function called n. So it will go back in the call sequence and it will go here and say, this n is what I want to change. So what happens here now? this n, okay, so now n becomes 7 here. Look at this, now n becomes 7 here. Okay, let's keep a track of it. Then we are calling printed now. Okay, now if I go and call printed with n, okay, let's see what happens now. So I'm calling printed with 7. So what's happening in printed now? Let's go and see what's happening here. Now, okay, the variable n here is 7. So we are calling printed. What is printed going to do? Printed is now going to say print x plus n. What is x? X is 7. 7 plus, it is trying to find what n is. There is no n in this function. So it will go back in the sequence. Here there is an n called 7. So 7 plus 7, it will print 14. So we are printing 14 next. Till now everything is okay. This function is also completed. Let me just increase the size of this. Okay, so this function is also done now. Now we come to increment function. Is there anything else in the increment function? Nothing else in the increment function. So we can just erase increment function also. Go back. Now we are in the run function. Okay, but okay, so we are in the run function, right? Okay, so but run function, because the increment function changed n, right? Anyway, let's come here. Let's come there. Just let's hang on there. Now we are saying, this is it. 1 second. Let me just 1 second. So in the increment function, okay, let me just write it. Explain this carefully. In the increment function, you had n equals to 7. Which n was it changing? So we said say the increment function had n equals to n plus 2, right? There is no variable within this function. So which n was it changing? It was actually changing this n to 7. Okay. So when you finish this increment function and go back to the original run function, you will see n as 7. Okay. Now what happens? Your increment is done. Now you say printf this. What will you print here? The printf value that you will do here will be 7. So the answer here is 11, 14, 7. Right? Simple logic. Is that clear? Again, this is tricky because I think the most tricky part here is, the most tricky part here is in the run function, we had n equals to 5. And then from the run function, we called the increment function. In the increment function, we had n equals to n plus 2. Which n is it changing? That is the tricky part. The n that it is changing is this n, because there is no local variable called n here, right? So this n was changed to 7. So some of you might say the answer should be 11, 14, 5, and it's not. It should be 11, 14, 7. Okay. Again, this question is intentionally created to be tricky. That's why I said it's a 2-mark question. It is considered medium plus tricky. Intentionally, it's done like that. Again, this is like a slightly, you could say, slightly on the harder side of a question about dynamic programming by gate standards. Okay, cool. So if there is, so for example, look at this. Here main, right? If I use an n here, I will use the global variable. Suppose if I printf n here, right? Then the global variable value will be used here, right? In dynamic scoping is very confusing. That's why I think most modern languages just kill it. Again, I can't execute this because C is statically scoped. C is statically scoped. Unfortunately, the only way we can execute something like this is to write code in Perl, defining each of these variables as dynamically scoped. I think in Perl there is this, keyword called, so there are 2 keywords in Perl called local and my, if I'm not wrong. My behaves like a static scoped. I think it's been almost a decade that I wrote code in Perl. I wrote it long ago. Let me just Google search it. Just give me a second. Perl dynamic and static, what is it called? Static scoping. Perl is almost dead now, unfortunately. Okay, so there is an article here. So how does Perl work? Yes, look at this. Perl's keyword my defines. Yes, exactly. So whenever you have a keyword with my, right, in Perl, right, it is defined as a local variable. While the keyword, if you define it with local, like this, right, local. Again, in Perl, all variables are defined with a dollar symbol in front of it. So this is dynamic scoping in Perl, right? So there is no way to execute this code on GCC or any compiler because C itself is statically scoped. This question is intentionally given as a slightly tricky one. Okay, so let's go to the third question. We have these interesting questions today because this is the last session with C, right? Again, we'll encounter pointers again when we do some data structures. Okay, let's solve the third question now. This is also an interesting question. Again, Sumit, please ask the same question at the end. I'll surely answer that. Okay. In this flow, when people are solving questions, I don't want to disturb them answering a general question, but it's a good question you asked. So I'll surely answer that at the end. Don't forget to post the same question at the end in case I forget. But now let's solve the questions now. That's important. Again, please avoid silly mistakes here. Please take your time. Be careful with this. It's an NAT. Okay, I see a few answers or few variety in answers. I see the obvious silly mistakes that some of you have made. You can try to correct it. You have to be careful with this question. You can't make silly mistakes. Okay, so let's answer this, right? So you're starting int main x equals to some function. Let's call it just f, right? So your x equals to f of 5, 256. You want to call this function, at the end you want to print x. This is the only print statement that is there. So you just want to compute this. Now, the moment you call f5, 256, what happens? Okay, let's go. Again, if you observe this function, whatever is there, func, I'm just calling it f, okay, just for simplicity, just so that we don't have to keep writing unc every time. Now, if you observe this function, it's saying you have a variable called x here, you have a and b as inputs, so this is your a, this is your b, there is a local variable x, you're counting. If b equals to 4, you're returning square of a, else you're running this whole thing. There is a recursion here. So this is like the boundary case of recursion, this is the recursive part of a recursive function. Now let's see what happens here. So now look at this, right? The count is a global variable, so count gets incremented. So count became 1 now. If b equals to 4, return this. B is not equals to 4. Else, what happens? Else you're calling, look at this, else what are you calling? You're calling f of a comma b by 4. So 256 by 4 is 64, right? So a is again the same 5, right? So a is the same 5 here. So 5 comma 64 is what you have. You're calling this function. So again, this goes into the recursive mode, right? So now a is 5, b is 64. Again, the count gets incremented, so count becomes 2 now, right? B equals to 4, no, b is not equals to 4, b is 64, right? So what happens now? If b is 64, you'll again get into the recursive loop. Now in the recursive loop, what do you call? F, a is 5, b is 16, right? Again, it is not 4. Now you got a hang of what's happening here, right? You do it a couple of times, you get a hang of it. Then finally you get 5 comma 4, because you're basically dividing by 4 every time. Okay, you're basically saying b is some 4 power some k. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. This k is what this much of nesting or this much of recursion you have. So the moment you have 4, what happens now? This is where you have to be slightly careful. Till here everything should be easy. Now if b equals to 4, again the count is getting incremented, but we don't care about count. While we are counting everything, we are not using it much anywhere in the code. So I can just ignore keeping track of the count. Okay, so f of 5 comma 4. So when b equals to 4, return a square. So what would this return? This would return 25 now. But where would it return? In this function, we are only executed till here. We still have to return x plus x. Remember, we still have to return x plus x. So what happens? This function now will double this, 25 plus 25. It will actually return 50 to this function. Right? It will actually return 50 to this function. Within this function, till where did we execute again? So within this function, we executed only till here. This is where we just finished the whole execution. It will return again x plus x. It will return 100 to this guy. Right? Now within this function again, we only executed till here. What would it return? It would return x plus x, which means it would actually return 200 to this variable x. And when you print it, you get 200. Some of you got 100 as the answer, probably because you didn't keep track of these carefully. I think one of you also said 25 as the answer. I think you forgot to see this. This is a simple, straightforward recursion. It's a slightly tricky. So this question is easy plus tricky. It's not medium plus tricky. It's easy plus tricky because most people will not do this carefully. Most people will miss this. So once you revert back from a recursion, see if there are any other lines of code. You have to be careful to see what other lines of code exist after the recursion is complete. Right? So that's important to make a note of. Okay, cool. Again, many of you got a right answer. The count is there just to trick you here. There is no point in the count. Even if you remove it, the code doesn't change. Okay, it's a straightforward question. Count is there only to trick you. Cool. So, okay, here comes another question. Yes, Sumit, you're right. So if you see most of the problems when I try to solve, or when many of our teammates try to solve, we draw diagrams. Diagrams is the best way, especially for recursion. You're very right about it. This is an interesting question. This is an NAT where you have to fill both these boxes. So some number here and some number here. This is all about macros in C. Please be careful. Again, let me tell you, this is an easy question if you know the concept of how macros work, but it is tricky. We have intentionally given more tricky questions today because this is the last session on C programming. We'll start data structures algorithms from the next session. Many of you are making a mistake. If this question was so damn easy, why would we even ask you? That's why I gave you a hint that it is tricky. Still people are making a mistake. Okay, so this is literally like what, 6 lines, 7 lines of code, right? So let me walk you through this. So, okay, what is the output of this? So you have a macro called xyzx, you have a macro called constant ABC this, U, B, W is this. Now let's see how it works. How do macros work in C? If you know how they work, it's straightforward. Whenever you have something like this, whatever is there is treated as X. And in place of X here, whatever is here is copy pasted. So macros actually work by actually replacing this X here with whatever is there inside. So how would it work? If you just copy paste this here, how would it look like? 5 plus 4 star 5 plus 4 star 5 plus 4. Now you're saying int volume equals to this, which means this expression now will get evaluated. When you evaluate this expression, what would it return? This is 20, this is 20, 40, 40 plus 9, so it will be, volume will be 49. Again, this requires you to understand how macros work. Macros don't sum it up and then place it here. Macros copy, they literally copy. Again, macro replacement is something, if you know compiler design, it happens when the code is getting compiled itself. It doesn't happen at runtime. Okay, so basically this XYZ 5 plus 4 is replaced by this whole expression at compile time itself. It just takes this and replaces it. So the way to think about macros is wherever X is there, this X is now 5 plus 4, copy paste that. So what you get is 49. So this first thing is 49. Now let's come to the second one. Okay, so you're printing volume and you're printing UVW. Here there's a very interesting thing. What will UVW get replaced by? UVW will get replaced by ABC. There is some space here. If you observe, there is a space here. Space star 5. Now what is ABC? ABC itself is a macro constant. So this will again get replaced by 5. So you'll have 5 space star 5. Now when you have an algebraic expression when you have a mathematical expression like this with space, C simply ignores it and it would treat it as 5 star 5, which will be 25. And it would actually print that. So this is also 25. Very simple. So the most important thing with respect to how macros work is it's a copy paste that happens when the code is getting compiled. It doesn't happen at runtime. In most implementations of C programming, it happens in the compile time. Okay, if you know compiler design. Okay, simple. Many of you have said 729 because you're summing this up and you're thinking that this happens at runtime. That's a fundamental that's a fundamental mistake. Okay, so it's an easy question. If you know how macros work, this is straightforward question. Many of you got it right, which is happy, but some of you made the obvious mistake that you have to be careful about. Again, very, very typical of Gate. Cool. Here comes the last question of the day. Again, today we have intentionally given slightly tricky questions. I didn't execute this code. Let me just execute it a little later before I discuss the answer. I'm sure our team would have executed it. Okay, I see all the options here. I see A, C, D. Again, let me tell you, this question is tricky. Some of you are saying B. Why? I'm really curious. I'm just curious. Why? Can somebody explain me? Those of you, I can understand the reasoning behind A. I can understand the reasoning behind C. I can understand the reasoning behind D also. I'm not able to understand why some of you are saying B. Very handful of you are saying B. Why? Okay, let's actually execute it in an online GCC compiler, just to be sure. Just to be sure. I think our team would have done it earlier, but just to be careful. Got it, yes. Okay. Very good, Lavanya. Actually, very good point. Actually, when I was solving this question, I made a mistake. So let me tell you that very clearly. I made a mistake while solving it. When I started thinking of why I made the mistake, it was eye-opening to me. Okay, so some of you got it right. The right answer is actually B. So if you actually execute this, like on this, it prints nothing. So when I was solving this, just like all of you, in a few hours before the live session, I made this mistake. So then I discussed with one of our teammates who explained me what is actually happening here, and that was a big eye opener for me. So here we have a union. How do unions work? Whichever variable has the largest size, that much memory will be allocated. So let's just assume that integers could be represented in 32-bit, or let's just keep the life simple, right? So let's assume integers are either 16-bit or 32-bit. String, there are four characters, so it will be 4 bytes, right? So 4 bytes. So let's assume it's a reasonable assumption on most computers, right? So this is str0, 1, 2, 3. Now integers also most likely use 16 bits or 32 bits depending on your architecture, computer, etc. Now you're creating a union called demo. You're saying demo.a equals to 0. Remember, in unions only one of these variables can be declared. Only one of these variables can have a value. The moment you say demo.a equals to 0, what happens? The bit values, so this whole thing has 0, 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 right? There might be a subtle difference depending on the architecture. Here I'm assuming that this is a 32-bit, or in other words, I'm assuming that the int is represented using 32 bits. Imagine even if it uses 16-bit, what would happen here is it'll just make everything 0 because it only wants to store 0, right? In most, again, I don't have a computer which uses only 8 bits for int or 16 bits, so I can't test it. But what is happening here is this. Now again, it could be this, or it could be the first two bytes are used to represent an int. In the worst case, or even if only 1 byte is used to represent an int, it would be stored as this. So it could be this depending on how much size is occupied by the int, whether it's 32 bits, whether it is 16 bits or 8 bits. In all cases, typically, in most computers, it is this first memory location where 0 would get filled. Now, you're saying demo.str1 equals to a. Now, if you observe what is happening here, this value will be made equals to character a. Remember, this is character a. And in C programming, everything is ASCII. So, if you have a 32-bit, if you have 32 bits to store int, this will become a, this will become a, or this will become a. These two could be garbage, these two could be garbage. Now we are saying print demo.string. So when I answered this question, I said the answer is 0a. That's what I answered it. So I made a mistake. Okay, the mistake I made, which is 0, again, what is stored here is actually 8 bits. What is stored here is actually 8 bits, which represent numerical value 0. It's not ASCII 0, remember, it's not ASCII 0. It is numerical 0. And numerical 0 in ASCII, because C uses ASCII for all characters, this in ASCII represents null. Right? So what is actually being stored in whatever architecture you're using, what is being stored here is a null character followed by a, followed by, it could be null characters or anything else. Now when you try to print something which starts with a null character, what happens? It prints nothing because it sees this as the end of the string. Right? So it's a very interesting question where you have to understand how storage of the unions work internally. You have to understand this. What I missed when I was solving this question is that 0, if all bits are 0 in ASCII, it is actually null. This is the thing that I missed when I was solving this question. I made a, like I said, I mean, when I was thinking, I didn't even say that answer should be 0a. I said it could be 0a followed by some garbage, but there is no \0. How does it work? So I said it would give some form of garbage till the time it sees null. So I said none of these is the right answer actually. So I couldn't arrive at an answer because I missed the fact that all zeros in ASCII represent null. That is the key aspect that I missed, and I made a special note in my head to always look out for that whenever we are printing strings. That is my mistake of the day, and it was a great takeaway because I learned something new. Okay, cool. So I hope everybody got this, and this was a fun session for us. Cool. Okay, so let's go into just give me a second. I'll change tracks now, and let's go and answer some of your questions. So one of the questions that one of the students raised, which I mentioned, let's ask at the end again, was that I didn't score good marks in the scholarship test. I couldn't tackle many of the questions. Should I prepare for GATE? It's a very nice question. I would say the GATE examination itself has some, how many months? We are in June, right? So July, August, September, October, November, December, Jan, middle of Feb. We almost have 6-8 months to prepare. So if you have not prepared these concepts well, it's hard to assume that you would score well in it. But 6 to 8 months, if you're dedicated, if you put in good effort of about 3 hours a day, in 6 to 8 months, you can have significant improvement. So we have seen people who barely scored marks in scholarship tests in the previous years, but ended up getting in the top 300 ranks in the actual GATE exam, because they took that as a wake-up call and they said, okay, I know where I stand now. Let me buckle up, get serious about it and improve. So there are people who got single-digit marks last year and the year before that, who actually got in the top 300 ranks in the last year and the year before that. So don't worry about it. Don't take it to heart. Just let's keep pushing it. Again, what is important in the GATE, again, we have also seen, let me also tell you the other side of it. We have seen people who did superbly well in scholarship tests, who just tanked in the main GATE exam because they got overconfident and cocky, and they said, hey, I've done so well in scholarship test, I can just go ahead and work only 1 or 2 hours a day. Those guys literally tanked the exam in the final days. So we have seen both sides. What is important, whether you got a good scholarship rank or otherwise in the scholarship test, what is important is the persistence of effort. Even if you start from today, you can easily crack the GATE exam. We have seen people who started in late August, even September last year, put in solid effort of 4-5 hours a day and cracked it by Feb. Number one. The second thing that I think somebody had a good question here, which is, one second, just let me open up the chat window here so that I can see it. Don't worry about it. I mean, please don't worry about it. Okay, so Prakar has a nice question, which is, I'm preparing for IIIT HPGE. What should I prepare? Again, I think I mentioned this in the previous session also. IIIT PGE, one of our co-founders, Naveen, studied there. That examination typically has a lot of focus on programming, data structures, algorithms, and aptitude. They have a lot of weightage for it. So prepare those subjects more thoroughly, and whatever other subjects which are there in the syllabus, their aptitude tends to be harder than GATE. Rest everything is mostly at GATE level, but they're checking for your coding skills more than what typically GATE does. So if you prepare these subjects well, I think you're on the right track. Cool. That's okay, Bitu, that's okay. I mean, happens to all of us. Okay, we all make mistakes. We all learn from it. Hey, Divyank, I'm happy you chimed in. So Divyank says, I've seen journey of 33 marks in scholarship test to 34th GATE rank. Very nice. So I'm happy you chimed in and put your perspective. Happy to hear that. Again, we've seen a lot of students like this, so don't worry about it. And the results, 99% probability, will be out by tomorrow, which is 23rd of June, which is a Wednesday, by end of day, most likely by night. If possible, we'll do it faster, if possible. Number one, but we'll try and do it by end of day. The same page where you wrote the examination, the results, the whole data will be available there. Okay, I hope that helps. So Sheikh says, can coding and GATE preparation go hand in hand? Yes. So that's the reason we started the whole GATE plus placement prep course, because we see a lot of students who need it as part of their campus placements or in general career transitions. So there is a significant overlap. So GATE teaches you data structures, algorithms, and problem solving, which is important to crack good companies. But good companies also require programming practice. So in addition to GATE prep, try and write as much code as possible in any language of your choice. Somebody asked, what language should I use for data structures, algorithms? Data structures, algorithms is not about a language. it's about getting the concept correct. Then you can implement it in C, you can implement it in Python, you can implement it in Java, doesn't matter. You just have to know a library. Like for example, in C++, there is something called STL. In Python, there are some inbuilt data structures like hash tables, etc., lists and things like that. So Java also has some inbuilt data structures. Other data structures are publicly available libraries that you can use. Right? So it's not so much about the language. Of course, you have to know the basics of language, how the language operates, how variables work, how pointers work if it's C++, how garbage collection works and things like that. But the most important thing for you would be arriving at the concept. That is the most important one. Okay, cool. How many marks in the test series for rank about 1000? Again, Nitish, I have to check for rank 1000 in GATE, but I think if I'm not wrong, you will get a rank below 500 if you get around 60-ish marks. Again, this is what I remember at the top of my head. Yeah, that's what I remember at the top of my head. Okay. Okay, there is literally a flood of questions. I'll try to answer as many as possible. So let me just go. Just a second. I'm trying to pick the non-obvious ones. So Rumit says, I can get NIT Calicut. Should I go with it or take a drop with job in TCS? Rumit, can you just call us on the phone number that is there on Applied GATE course, so that we can understand the context better, exactly which program you're getting and things like that, because I don't want to give you a general answer without understanding what you're aspiring for. For example, if you're looking for a PhD program or you're looking for jobs, so we just want to understand that little better. So just call us on the phone numbers on GATE Applied course so that we can give you a more personalized answer, or shoot an email. One second. I've completed 4 subjects from course videos. Should I start giving test of the subjects? So Pratik, that's a good question you asked. So what I would recommend you is, so the 4 subjects that you've completed, right? First try to do the answers, first try to solve the test series problems from 2021, because as a course enrolled student, you have the last year test series also, right? So first solve the questions from the 2021 test series. Then in the next revision, you can go and solve the 2022 test series. That's what we would recommend. Again, we'll most likely push out and make an announcement about the test series itself in less than 48 hours from now. Most likely tomorrow or the day after. Because most of our team is just finishing the scholarship test evaluation and things like that. So we'll come back to that. Again, somebody's asking, is X% marks good in scholarship test? I think I mentioned this at the beginning itself. If you're scoring 40 plus marks or 40% plus marks in the scholarship test, kudos to you, you're on the right track. You may not be the top 200 students, but you're on a good track, because scoring 40% at this point is non-trivial. It's actually good, right? So just make sure that you're putting in the persistent effort over the next 7.5, 8 months. I think you can easily go to the 70 plus in the GATE examination if you're scoring 40 plus. If you're scoring 40%, no, I'm not saying 40 marks, I'm saying 40% marks. Okay. If you're scoring less than 40% marks, you need to start preparing more seriously. Again, the scholarship test is very similar to our practice tests in nature. Okay. So if you're scoring less than 40%, 30 to 40% is still okay. Just make sure you have, most of you who probably got 30 to 40% marks probably made a bunch of silly mistakes. So start avoiding them, start working on that. Right. So as one of us, as one of the students rightly mentioned, he got some 33 marks last year, but he got AR 34. Right. So that happens all the time. So because what matters is not your rank at this time. What matters is your actual GATE rank. And we still have 7.5 months to catch up and fight. Those of you who get good marks, if you don't put in the effort, trust me, you will lose everything. Okay. So please be persistent. In C programming, one second. So in C programming subject, we have to remember many things, right? Not exactly Jimmy. C programming is fairly conceptual. Like I don't write C programming every day, but I still remember it fairly reasonably well. There are a few things that I keep forgetting, which I have to revise. For example, before these 4 live sessions on C programming, the most important things that I forget are the precedence and associativity. But rest of the concepts are fairly intuitive. If you know how memory works, the hardest part about C is the pointer stuff. So you have to be careful on understanding how the pointer stuff is working. If you know that, it's fairly straightforward actually. Right? That's the only tricky part in your typical C programming language. Of course, precedence and associativity, I'm very bad at remembering facts, so I have to revise it and remember some tricks for that. Shyam has a very nice question. So he says, I've started my gate preparation late. How do I compete with people who started 4 or 5 months before me? Shyam, there are also people who have been preparing gate for 2 years now. You're also going to compete with them. As I always tell, it is not the duration for which you prepare. Gate 6 months, if you're diligent, you can get a rank in the top 100 ranks. I will not say top 1 because that's a joke. To get rank 1, you have to get lucky. Okay, because the difference between rank 1 and rank 10 is so minuscule sometimes. Sometimes, not always. The difference between rank 1 and rank 2 could be extremely minuscule. Like during my days, because I got 2, I lost rank 1. We just back calculated all the numbers because I got negative 0.25 in one of the questions. Okay, so you just have to get lucky to get 1. So I'll not talk about rank 1. In the top 100 ranks, if you want to get it, you can comfortably get it if you do 6 months of rigorous preparation. So it's not when you start, it's how well you go through it. So we have some videos on our YouTube channel, like how to build your problem solving skills, how to plan the whole gate prep itself. What is the core focus area? So simply put, build your problem solving skills by solving problems, struggling through the problems, making note of silly mistakes that you make, go through the concept, revise. These are the simple fundas of gate prep. It's as simple as that. Okay. If you do that, it doesn't really matter. So DK says previous years 2008 to 2021, more than enough, man. More than enough to prepare. I mean, more than sufficient in your case. If you're doing last 10 years of question papers, that's more than sufficient in most cases. Again, somebody is asking about silly mistakes. Again, I keep telling you this, right? So check out that video. If you want, I'll show you that video. 1 second. So let me just go to YouTube. Let me just open up that. Okay, so there are so many problem solving sessions now. Okay. Oh, there is also a live session. Okay, I forgot that there was a live session. I completely forgot about it. So let me start sharing my screen. So it's not just a video. We have a live session. So it's on Gate Applied Course channel. It's called How to Improve Your Problem Solving Skills for Gate CS 2022. So it's literally like a 1 hour 17 minutes video. I think the last few minutes, the last 20-30 minutes may be general discussion, but please go through this. While it's slightly lengthy, you can go through it at slightly faster speed, or you can just go through the initial parts of it. I think the crux of it is about 30-40 minutes. So if you can go through it, that will be extremely helpful for your gate prep in terms of avoiding silly mistakes, in terms of building your logic, in terms of just building the problem solving mindset itself. Scholarship test cutoff, I don't know, to be honest with you. So till the time we publish it, I don't know the cutoff myself. I don't know that number. We'll publish all the numbers anyway publicly. So should I study 10 hours a day to get All India rank under 100? Not at all. So we have seen people who on an average put in 3.5 hours a day for about 6 months. Again, if you're putting in more time, it is the quality of time that you put in. We have seen people who have done gate prep full time, 8 hours a day, and they've not gotten a good rank. Okay, so it's a quality of effort and the systematic problem solving skills building and continuous revision that matters more than. So I think, my strong gut feel is 3.5 hours a day, 6 months, maybe slightly more than that. If you're doing 6 months, maybe 4 hours a day, good enough to do well in GATE, sorry. So we don't have a scholarship test again for GATE CSC 2022. We'll have it for 2023. I think we mentioned this earlier also. It takes a lot of energy from our team to set these questions, to evaluate all the answers, to make sure that everything is good. It takes a lot of effort. It's literally like 15 days of effort for the team. And we don't want to keep doing it. Doesn't make sense because we want to spend that time actually serving the students who are already learning in the program. That's very important for us. So GATE test series, I think we'll launch it in a day or two. So by this week, by probably Friday, you'll have it for sure. Okay. Okay. No more scholarship test. I think our team also mentioned that. So Abhay has a very nice question. He says, GATE is not about depth, but about breadth. Very nice question. But how do I solve tricky questions if I don't know depth? Again, when I say depth, let's take C programming, right? How do unions store data? That is not too deep. That's actually basics of memory management of union. We described that in our C programming classes or in our C programming course also. It's not depth. The depth is how does GCC implement something internally? That is the depth. That's what you would learn if you're studying compiler design at a graduate level or if you're doing a PhD in compiler design. Don't go to that depth. That's what we are saying. The basic depth, like you have to know how memory is managed by C, right? How malloc works, how pointers work. That is not depth. That is still breadth. There's little depth. It's not like going too deep into a GCC compiler. We have seen students who would actually ask us questions about, hey, GCC compiler implements it like this, Visual Studio C# implements it like this. What is right? I'm like, dude, we are not doing a PhD here. We are preparing for GATE prep. I'll try to answer it as best as I can because I've never used Visual Studio C# compiler, but we'll try our best, right? So just that's what we mean when we say breadth versus depth trade-off. Again, we'll announce everything about the test series in a couple of days. Just bear with us. Okay. Please be a little patient. We'll tell you that. So Manan, a very good question. So do NITs and IITs MTech CSC allow students from BTech? I think some universities allow as long as you've written the GATE CSC exam. So if you have not written the GATE CSC exam, they may not allow. But there are programs offered. For example, there is MTech in AI, which is jointly offered by the Electrical Engineering or EECS, Electrical Engineering and Computer Science division in Institute of Science, and they take courses in various centers, including the Computer Science department there. And if I'm not wrong, they take students. I'm 90% sure they take students not just from CSA, but people from ECE background who have written GATE ECE also, right? But we have seen a lot of students again from ECE, EEE, etc., who write GATE CSC and get into MTech CSC programs. That's perfectly valid in most IITs, NITs, and Institute of Science. Rushi, it takes a lot of effort for us to compile all the marks. Most importantly, to run all of our algorithms to detect any anomalous behavior. That takes a lot of time, and we want to be very, very careful when we announce the marks. That's why I think even when the test was conducted, we said it will be on 23rd, end of day. I think 9 p.m. was what was mentioned earlier. So we'll try and do it. Again, we want to have the results as accurately as possible without any errors, rather than being in a hurry. I think you can easily wait 12 more hours. Okay. Dinesh says, what is the effect of automation on software engineering jobs? I mean, it's all some what do you call it? Some business myth actually. I think software is eating the world, and I don't see a lot of pieces of software that can be automated. There are tons of, like, how do you design a great scalable system? It's not that easy. Of course, the software engineering field itself will evolve. It has evolved enormously in the last 10, 12 years that I've seen it. Just like, of course, machine learning has also evolved a lot. So the field itself evolves, but automation is something that software engineers themselves have to build to automate the easy to do things. Building software is extremely complex. I mean, I would say building a complex software is as complex as building a rocket ship. So it's not easy. I mean, just imagine all the code that goes into an iPhone or into an Apple Watch or into an Android phone. It's millions of lines of code, right? Brilliantly orchestrating everything. So it's not an easy task. It's just like the millions of pieces that go into a rocket. So I don't see, at least in my lifetime, software jobs going too bad. Again, I don't see it. Again, I'm very bullish on it. That's why I'm in this field. Okay, sounds good. So I think I've answered most of the questions. There is a nice question. I'll briefly answer it without going into all the details. How do you detect malpractice and things like that? So this is actually our turf, because myself included, my team members, we have worked on detecting anomalous behavior at Amazon scale, like literally on millions of user traffic. So there are a lot of techniques in machine learning, like anomaly detection techniques, outlier detection techniques, where for all of our tests, we have so much of data that we collect. That's why it takes time to crunch all of it. We track everything, every mouse movement that you make, everything that can be captured in JavaScript. We capture every minuscule amount of data. And we do find anomalies. We do find really abnormal behavior, which is a 99% proof that somebody is doing some form of malpractice. We simply throw that guy out of the program. We don't even evaluate, we don't even consider their marks if you're 99% sure. Again, remember that most machine learning systems are not 100% foolproof. We believe, because we have been doing these tests, we conduct all India mock tests, we do all of it, we have been doing it for 3 years. We have gotten used to what students do. Again, students think they're very smart, we have done this, we have done that. But what you're doing for the first time, we are doing it for 3 years. We have done it for like 20-25 tests now. And we have built really, really robust systems. So while I will not claim that we are 100% foolproof, we believe, at least internally, that we are 99.9% foolproof. So I don't want to go into the more details about it, because if I tell you the secret sauce, people will try to crack it. So there's no point in it. With that, I will leave that. Okay. Cool. Sounds good, folks. All the very best, and looking forward to the scholarship test results. And also the test series. Most likely we will announce it before the next live session. The next live sessions will be in data structures and algorithms. Please look at the chat window. At the top, there is a pinned Google Doc. Let's go with data structures algorithms. Again, all the live sessions, live interactive problem solving sessions for data structures and algorithms will also be publicly available, because many students are preparing for placements and we want to do as best as we can and help them in their preparation. See you guys. All the best. Stay safe. Bye-bye.